yeah, basically, because there's multiple fronts involved,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
they're so diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Like it goes everything from basic things like processing plants being sabotaged,
That's right.
which is beyond statistical probability.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you get all of these food processing plants suddenly catching on fire, breaking down? One even got hit by an airplane from the sky.
Sounded so much like 9/11.
Exactly, and so, and then at the same time, you have all these artificial problems with truckers and port facilities and things like that.
Mhm,
And then there's the financial sabotage going on in Europe
mhm,
with the Ukraine situation,
mhm,
where there's absolutely no damage being done to Russia by any of those
mhm,
sanctions.
mhm.
So why are they doing the sanctions? The sanctions,
Well, they use that as an excuse to A,
uh huh.
to penalize us poor souls, aka general public, and B, come out with more lame excuses to exercise what they want to do
Yes,
in their minds.
and
For
what?
example,
Mm-hmm.
they use that they use sanctions, they use the war still ongoing, although the latter part of the excuse starts to wear thin because the activity seems to have wind down substantially to the point where I believe it's just a matter of mopping things up.
Well,
Uh, but they use that as an excuse, and now I mean, the most ridiculous things that came out on the mainstream media news that, oh yeah, we're gonna ship some baby formulas to Ukraine to help the public. Meanwhile, that creates the so-called shortages in the United States.
yes, and very few people noticed that one of the major processors of baby formula was
Aberrant laboratories.
it was closed because of some kind of safety inspection or health inspection or something
Yeah.
about 6 months ago.
Yep.
And by so these are government actions; they're coordinated government actions. None of this is natural.
Of course.
An excellent example is the ridiculous situation where the Russians are actually profiting from oil and gas sales
Of course.
at the same time that the Europeans are supposedly sanctioning Russia. Well, I thought sanctions are supposed to hurt your enemy, not help them. And then the Europeans themselves are faced a situation where they have to rebel against their unelected EU masters, and that's what all this is about. So one after the other, we've got EU countries, and in some cases businesses just not listening to the EU anymore, and they're just going to buy Russian gas with rubles.
That's right.
And
A lot of these, you
mhm.
are indeed correct. The fact that there has been reports where numerous companies, numerous places,
Yes,
accounts with Gazprom Bank
yes.
to to continue buying, natural gas and fuel resources through that account.
And what you can also see is a desperate attempt by the Americans to grab money any way they can. And the latest one is the actual attempt to export or to remove from Ukraine their grain reserves. For what reason? Well, to sell it, of course, and to grab the money. And the other thing, of course, we know that probably more than 50% of all the humanitarian and military aid going to Ukraine is getting diverted into the hands of criminals and being sold on the black market, et cetera, et cetera. It's all an obvious scam. And then you've got the war itself, which is a propaganda disaster. Everybody knows the Russians are doing a good job of cleaning out a horrible situation full of totally illegal bioweapons laboratories, all of which go against multiple treaties between nations.
Mhm. Of
And the
course.
Russians have got all the evidence, and they can go to the UN and present that, and it just goes on and on. So that's the one aspect of it. The other aspect of this attack against the cabal is the legal aspect, and
Mhm,
we're
mhm.
seeing. Even though the media doesn't want us to know, we're seeing win after win on the legal front.
Yes.
And for example, the Senate in the United
Yes.
States, the election fraud, people seem to think that that has to do with Trump coming back into office. No, that's only one small aspect. What about
Mm-hmm.
all the rest of the elections in the United
Mm-hmm.
States? For
Mm-hmm.
example, elections to the Senate,
That's
elections to
right.
Congress.
Yeah.
Now, Senate elections are very important because those have to do with actual spending and actual things like nominations to the Supreme Court and so on. Now, if it turns
Mm-hmm.
out, and remember, for the last year, we've had a number of Senate decisions, this is US politics, which were
Sure.
decided by a single vote.
Mm-hmm.
Because Kamala Harris, the tie-breaking vice president, had to cast her vote for everything, just about, including the actual spending of the U.S. government for the last year and a half or so. Now,
Yeah.
if the several Senate seats are found to be fraudulent and where they were elected under false pretenses and they are removed and new elections are called in those particular seats, in those jurisdictions, then that means that all the laws that were enacted by the previous Senate are now
Mm-hmm.
null and void and have to be revisited.
Correct.
So
That's right.
that'll cause massive chaos. The entire the Biden actions, all actions, including things like, because remember, everything has to be approved by the Senate. So anything to do
Mm-hmm.
with money and spending.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that will be
Mm-hmm.
rolled back. All of
Mm-hmm.
that will have to be redone.
That's right.
So there's a legal aspect there that'll throw the United States into total chaos,
Mm.
and it'll destroy the Biden agenda completely.
Of course.
Mm. And then, of course, the other front on which these things are happening is the public perception, what we call the wake up plan.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, everybody's starting to figure out that Hollywood influencers and
Yes.
so-called celebrities are
Yes.
not only doing the bidding of their masters, but have artificially inflated Twitter followings.
Of course.
And Twitter itself has been revealed to be a fraudulent organization. And it's remember it's a listed on the stock market company that sells advertising, and if it's been doing that under false pretenses, as revealed by Elon Musk,
That's right.
then they're open to lawsuits, which will destroy the company. It won't be worth a dime because it'll have to
Yep.
pay damages to all these people, and it could be well over 50% of Twitter is fake robot
Yep.
accounts.
Yep.
And if that's true, Twitter's not worth anything because its liabilities will be more than its value. And of course, it also makes nonsense out of all of these people who say they have millions of Twitter followers when in fact they don't. And
Yes.
that goes for Biden himself, who's estimated to
That's
have
right.
more than 50% fake followers. So on it goes. And then of course there's the civil rights and the freedom of speech aspects. When you find out, if we find out that Twitter has been artificially muzzling
Yes.
the freedom of of people who sign on to a Twitter account, and those people who are perceived to be right wing have their accounts neutered or constricted, whereas those who are perceived to be left wing have their accounts uh, mushroomed or
Mm-hmm.
inflated with fake bot followers. So now that's a breach of contract. So anyone who has a Twitter account, a commercial Twitter account, because
Mm-hmm.
it's free to use for the general population. But if you're an enterprise, you have to pay a fee to Twitter. That's their profit margin. You have to pay for advertising, and all of that.
Right.
They'll just sue. They'll say, "Hey, look, we have evidence here. Elon Musk, through his due diligence, has revealed that you have a fake company that says things that are not true. So that's it. Goodbye." And it'll just all collapse under the weight of their illegal practices.
You bet.
And if it's in the newspaper that a lot of these things are lies, for example, I have a friend who insists that Donald Trump is not popular, and that more than 50% of the American people voted for Biden and like him better.
Certainly.
And if they get evidence that all of this is not true, such as the Twitter
Mhm.
revelations, well, then, it kind of psychologically is hard for them to justify their hatred for Donald Trump if it was artificially generated in the first place.
True, true. It's part of the propaganda machine.
Yeah.
but but to some of these hardcore
Uh huh.
followers of social medias and such, um, I would say they are conditioned. Some of them have been conditioned to such a point
Sure.
where facts don't really matter.
Yeah.
For example, every time these days, if you ever notice or if you ever witness online that whenever there's a rally gathering for Donald Trump
Mm-hmm.
from one state to another, the field, be it a football field, be it some kind of runways or something, is basically filled with crowds.
Yes.
But on the other hand, the most recent, if memory serves, the most recent several public gatherings of President Joe Biden,
Mm-hmm.
well, there's only a few handfuls, if not 20 or 30 or less than 100 people show up for those events
Yes.
or, listen to his speech and whatnot. So what does that imply?
Well, that
I mean,
implies,
to my eyes, it
yeah.
just means that the contrast is so stark, so obvious that it's far fetched for some of the hardcore naysayers to say, "Oh, Donald J. Trump is not popular."
Exactly. And
If
what's
it's
the
not popular, then why would all these rally gathering of supporting certain states governor, or providing additional support for certain Republican candidates? Like people are not paid to show up in those circumstances. I mean,
no, and they're not.
and
Yeah, and
yeah,
popularity is the underpinning and the basic substratum of democracy. If
that's
somebody
right.
is popular, they win the election. If they're not, they don't. If their ideas, their platform is popular, then it gets enacted into law, and if not, it doesn't. And so it's our very society at stake here. It's not just a game played on a Twitter account. It's the direction in which society as a whole is going is determined by
Mhm.
the popularity of our elected officials. And if that has been compromised either by outright
Mhm.
cheating in elections or by
Mhm.
manipulation of popularity artificially
Mhm.
using technology, then that's unconstitutional, that's illegal, and also it changes reality itself. Because
Mhm.
then we have a different mindset. Now, if you go to a country like North Korea, you'll
Mhm.
find that they have a different reality there. What they believe in and what they think in and how they behave and how they act is quite different because it's based on a different perception of reality than ours. And that goes for any society, whether it's in the darkest jungles of Africa to the most enlightened, educated people on Earth. And so that's the stake of humanity and its future right there is revealing the
Mhm.
truth of people's influence, people's ideas, and whether they have followers or don't have followers. And that's what is being revealed right now. And it'll lead to concrete re-elections and concrete erasures and resets of various policies. For example, here we have a situation where the EU, for example, which is unelected, and the Biden administration, which is perhaps fraudulently elected,
Mhm.
is causing massive economic damage worldwide and leading the entire planet into a recession because of their economic policies against Russia. For what reason? Now, if it turns out that these people are all fraudulent, then there won't be any sanctions against Russia, in which case we won't have high gas prices, we won't have food shortages, we won't have starvations and famines, and that goes for everything. You see, it goes for things like COVID and the reaction and to that. Everything in the world that's really happening to you, if you backtrack and look at that, it's the result of who was popular and who got elected and whose ideas and whose policies became your government.
That is correct,
And
sir. That is
it's all based on things like how many followers did that person really have? How many votes did that person really get? And that's why the entire pathway into the future for society and a reexamination of our past paths is at stake here.
right.
It's not just a silly little game with social media.
That's right.
And it goes on from there. And that's why we're in a revolution. Whenever you change somebody's mind, that was a revolution for their soul,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and for their and that was a revolution to determine the actions of them and of others vis-a-vis them in the future.
Indeed.
And that's what we're dealing with. Now look at this Tamara Lynch situation just here in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I love it because here you have the government going absolutely mad with frustration, trying to vilify this woman, trying to stop her from, I don't know, sending emails to her grandmother
Mm.
and taking away and saying that she breached, get a load of this, she breached her bail conditions because she accepted a Freedom of Speech award. And they say that one of her bail conditions is that she must not support the truckers movement. Well, this Freedom of Speech organization is supported by the United Nations and by Doctors Without Borders and all kinds of international people, and there is no truckers movement right now. So how could
Of course.
receiving an award breach her bail condition? Well, the point is that that's nothing to do with it. The point is that if the government loses its attempt to vilify
Yes.
anyone who stands up to their lies and their disinformation, then it's lost its credibility. So they attack Tamara Lynch, and they attack her so virulently that the mad dog prosecutor that's been hired by the federal government to prosecute this woman has even demanded that the judge recuse himself because he's not following the government's orders and locking this woman up. Well, so the judge must be bad. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not the way it works in a democracy. The legal system doesn't take its orders from the government. It's supposed to be independent.
Goodness.
But I guess this just doesn't occur to somebody like our prime minister and those in his government who seem to feel that they can demand anything with and that their so-called sunny ways include mass repression of human rights and dignity and freedom in this country. And it's got to end, and it will end, and it won't last. And to add insult to injury, these people show up in the media and refuse to debate properly in the democratic process, and it's so bad that obviously if we had elections tomorrow, we'd suddenly live in a different country, wouldn't we?
Most likely so, yeah. Citing that most recent Alberta premier, I think he's the leader of the UCP,
Yeah.
or UPC party.
Yeah,
Yeah, lost his internal party support.
he did because the
So-
internal party has now has now decided that they are independent people and are not going to be working for the WEF like Mr. Kenney obviously is. In other words, they want a real leader, not somebody who represents some other outside faction. They want somebody
That's
that
right.
represents the people of Alberta, or at least the Conservative Party of Alberta. So they've turfed him out. And like I said, if there was election, I think they're having an election in Alberta very soon, and
Very soon.
the Conservative Party there will elect a new leader, and that new leader will no doubt become the next premier. And the whole point is that the leaders have to be elected by the people
Mhm.
in proper conventions, not conventions that are based on uh, party manipulation, like with Trudeau, for example.
Right.
If you remember, Trudeau became leader of the Liberal Party in Canada at a convention where the votes were counted by Dominion voting machines.
How convenient.
Isn't that interesting? Now, why would you need a Dominion electronic voting machine to count 4 or 5 thousand votes? Because there are only 4 or 5 thousand members of the Liberal voting members at a Liberal convention. So there's no technological reason why you can't have it on pieces of paper, which is verifiable. So why on earth would you use an electronic voting machine in a leadership convention unless you want to cheat somehow?
That's right.
So I don't even think he's a legitimate leader of the Liberal Party myself. And it goes on and on and on and on from there. So, are we going to have a revelation of the truth of these situations? We got a court case right now in the United States. In Canada, we're still in darkness. We can't get proper legal recourse yet, although we're starting to see glimmers of it. But in the United States, at least, we've got concrete developments uh, with various members of the deep state on trial. This Michael Sussman gentleman, and it's being proved. It's being proved in court that he was under the orders of Hillary Clinton to fabricate false information and take it to the FBI and lie to them and use that as a political gambit to change the public's opinion. And that's what this is all about, to influence the
Yeah.
public's opinion. And of course, most people trust the FBI, just like most people trust the police in this country. And if the FBI is investigating Donald Trump, oh, he must be bad. And if the RCMP is investigating Pierre Trudeau for sexual misconduct, oh, they didn't do that, did they? Oh, they didn't do that. But if they had done that, then he wouldn't have been elected, would he? Oh, so public opinion can be influenced in very, very powerful and significant ways, depending on the
Yes,
behavior of our institutions.
that is correct.
And that's what this is all about.
Stop.